Top comment and in the description is the PayPal, the Cash App, the Buy Me a Coffee. The logo is in the Patreon. The last two have daily videos of me doing whatever. The first three don't. The show runs on 5,000 a month. For the first 6 years, it was about $200 a month from fans. In 2026, that's up to $1,500. That's the holy grail. That gets me away from big revenue streams. YouTube, Rumble, Spotify. That allows the show to be decentralized. If you can do $1 a month, that genuinely makes a difference. If you think that you can't do 100, so there's no point, do $1 a month. That genuinely makes a difference. If you want something in return, Heaven's Harvest pepper food. Use the link in the description and the promo code. Or Sport Drink. Use a promo code Tommy's Podcast. That link in the description too. Their Twitter is hilarious. And most importantly, if you don't want any of that and you feel like you're just throwing money away, I would ask you to go to ARC. That link is also in the description. The Association for the Recovery of Children. It's a group of former Special Forces guys since 1993. They average about 12 a year. They physically rescue sex trafficked kids. This isn't an awareness thing. This isn't a wristband thing. This isn't a, they make viral videos. They don't do anything. They don't take salaries. These are former tier one door kickers. They go and they literally rescue sex trafficked kids from pedophiles. They are archangels doing the Lord's work on earth. If you can donate anything, forget my podcast, go to that. That is actual goodness in this world, unlike my podcast, which is, whatever. All right, guys, love you. Thank you. And we are recording on Sunday, March 8th, 2026 at 11:11 a.m. Eastern time. Fucking daylight saving time is awful. I hate it. It's whatever. Of course, with General Holt and Colonel Watkins, and we're waiting for Colonel Doctor Astronaut Steve Murray, who I believe is in the International Space Station, and everything we were just talking. I don't even know if it's like a bad instinct. You were just saying everything, drop MREs on the Kurds and they won't touch shit. Is that just like a good survival instinct to not take anything we give them?
No. Just dietary wise, MREs suck. And I think the people were genuinely shocked that, the impression was that this is talking about in 1991. They were, concerned about them starving because they had fled Iraq into the mountains of southern Turkey. And so we think we're being, benevolent and dropping them food and stuff like that. We dropped them tents so that they could put the tents over the trees so they'd be out of the weather. And when we eventually go in to get them to transport them into a constructed tent city in order to transition them back to their homes, because Saddam Hussein's military had booby trapped with bombs many of their homes. And so we had to go through all of the cities in northern Iraq to clear out the ordnance that had been distributed there. The army was shocked that all of the employees were just left there because then they had to clean them all up because they wouldn't eat them. But my impression, and I know people disagree with me, I think they're horrible. They're high calorie, which I understand the need for that, but they taste awful. And the irony for me was they all came with these little Tabasco bottles.
That's part of the meal.
Army are fixated on Tabasco sauce. Now, this was the first time I'd ever deployed in this type of joint operation. I had deployed in Air Force related things, but never as a maintenance troop, but never surrounded by Army. Those were gold. So every time I got my MRE, I didn't eat it. I took the Tabasco sauce, and every collectible that I have from the EOD guys, the expended shells, pieces of marble from Saddam Hussein's airport that they were building, all of that was traded. I have an Iraqi knife with my Tabasco sauce. They're literal currencies when you deploy with the Army.
Completely unrelated to anything we're talking about, but I think maybe the best channel on YouTube is Steve MRE 1989. He's this guy that he finds any MRE. He's a total like historian connoisseur, but he's eaten MREs from like World War I and shit. And the joke is always when he doesn't upload that he's dead, and then he'll come back with another one or something. But no, I heard a great quote about MREs, and they're like, yeah, they taste like dog shit, so that you only eat them when you're truly hungry. so you don't waste them. So that's fair. But what were you guys saying beforehand as I was staring at you guys slack-jawed like an idiot as always about Lloyds of London? And I believe generally you were saying something about Taiwan, or did I screw that up?
Well, let's get to it because it's a bunch of marble ice cream. What
Yeah.
we were talking about is the fact that things are now moving so fast below the substrate that it's really, really hard to kind of keep up with the program. I was talking to the good colonel here about how I completely whiffed at the plate that zeroing out the regime in Iran, and they're basically dead man walking. They're on life support, flatlining. They're going to be gone soon. But the funding stream that was heading from them to South Africa, where you've got this brutal regime rolling up white farmers, murdering and raping and terrorizing their population, they're going to zero in their budget, and they're very vulnerable now. This changes the game geopolitically because of shipping. And so I'm going to get us back to Lloyds of London here in just a second. But that shipping passage, if you drop the Suez Canal, if you drop the Panama Canal, if you drop the Malaccan Straits, you're basically in a situation where that cape there is the most important shipping lane in the world. And that's why the Iranian, Russian, navies had been exercising down there a lot with the Chinese Navy as well, by the way. Well, here comes the big disruption. So now on land, the ANC gets zeroed out, and we look back up at the closure of the Straits of Hormuz. Well, who's closing them? Because it's certainly not the former Iranian Navy that's not there anymore. The missile batteries on the coast are gone. So what's stopping shipping? Well, Lloyds of London said, this is war, it's dangerous, we're not doing it. All insurance policies are on hold. So President Trump came back and countered with, okay, I get it. City of London subsidiary called Lloyds of London, which has been a monopolistic mess for and a real enemy of the United States for a very long time because they pick winners and losers on the high seas. Well, Lloyds of London quietly responded to President Trump saying, we'll insure the oil. Now just go ahead and run the oil through and we'll get naval escorts. Lloyds is now, and I know this from a source, Lloyds is now quietly telling the shipping companies they work with, if you take America up on those insurance policies, we will zero you out. And so you better be confident that the US will insure you forever. Well, that basically partially shut the straits down again. So this doesn't make a whole lot of sense on the big board because you would say, well, why would they do that? Because 50% of Chinese oil comes through those Straits of Hormuz. They need that oil. The Chinese Communist Party works hand in glove with the City of London that has Lloyds of London. Wait a minute. My theory, and you can both throw rocks at me, is what we have is a dangerous enemy in the City of London that is growing more and more desperate by the day. The cartels and the laundering schemes are coming down. Um, they have now exposed themselves as a true adversary to the United States. You know this when completely irrational things happen, like Keir Starmer coming out saying the U.S. can't use Diego Garcia for this war. The U.S. will not get any MI6 help with its operations in the Caribbean. And now the Lloyds of London mess. So when you have an enemy as sophisticated as the City of London is, the last thing they ever want is exposure. The last thing they ever want is for you to understand that they're the enemy. Because we've always spackled over that with this thing called the special relationship. Well, now you have Lloyds of London and the City of London essentially cashiering the Chinese Communist Party, and they know it. So, so now you've got in Beijing this awful choice. They have a Hobson's choice to make. And the Hobson's choice is, do we stick with our friends in air quotes London, or are we really going to have to get on board the Trump train and start working out this NSS arc kind of world that Trump has told us is coming? And in other words, I don't have more than that. I'm just telling you that the old world order is now got a severe crack in its base, and they know it, and they're acting irrationally, and they're actually showing some leg that I don't think they ever wanted to show because all heads are now twisting away from Tehran, going, whoa, 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 what are those guys doing? And so it's delicious. This is wonderful. I don't have enough popcorn for this.
So let me just add to that because I agree with everything you said. I have no rocks to throw, but I do want to add a
Damn
couple of things. The For the first time in my adult life, every single globalist adventure where aircraft are flying, ships are sinking, people are getting killed, the UK government was lockstep with the US. Lockstep. Even if it's just a few people to throw at it, they're with us every step of the way until now. First time. Not going to get involved. And then couple that with the point that he just made about Lloyds of London. Lloyds of London has insured through everything for over 100 years ships in the middle of conflict until now.
You know, what's interesting is I look at it as just like the podcast and networking, and you know, when we do shows, obviously you guys retweet it and and I'll retweet other people. And then I also know, like, sometimes I'll have, you know, I'll do a big show and I'll just send it like, hey, can you guys retweet this? Even if it's a guest that has nothing to do with you guys, even if it's a guest that maybe politically or not even specifically you guys, whatever, disagree with, you're like, yeah, Tommy's my homie and whatever, or retweet it, right? There's always that sort of special relationship with friends. With,
Yes.
Hey, Tommy, do you think you can interview this guy? He's my friend and I owe him. Yeah, I got you.
Yes.
You got to go out of your way for someone to be like, I'm not touching that. I've never had that happen. You got to go out of your way to be like, yeah, I'm not touching that. That's indicative.
Yes. And for the first time, you know, it's not like, oh, sometimes they're with us, sometimes they're not because they actually have standards or whatever. No, it's their lockstep because it was the globalist agenda. That I can't understand how people don't see Trump completely separate from the globalist agenda when it's staring you right in the face.
Yeah, it's this is really something. And one of the so I think that the high table and the shadowy overlords that you're not allowed to see are another damn names, although we do. I think that the problem that they have is when you set up a thing like the World Economic Forum since 1971, when you start to groom leaders that are going to become your pawns on the battlefield, your mid-level and senior managers like Starmer, Macron, Ruda, Ursula von der Leyen, Kaja Kallas, there's some attributes that you must have if they're going to do exactly what you say forever. First off, they have to be idiots. That's one thing. They have to have zero moral compass. The only thing that they crave is to become a vaunted member of the high table, and all you have to do is convince them that they have upward mobility to get to that place if they'll just do whatever the hell you say. And then if they start to get weak-kneed along the way, then you frame them, you put them in a room with a kid, you do something terrible, and then you own them forever anyway. Okay, that's the stage. But the problem is when you have idiots with no moral compass, when they tell a Keir Starmer and give him his script card, because this bear of very little brain didn't come up with this shit on his own. When he comes up and says, the United States will not be using Diego Garcia for this. He doesn't understand that when he gets that script card, he doesn't understand he's got to sell it. He's got to sell that as if it makes sense in the tapestry that is the geopolitics of the moment. So he could have come out and nuanced it and said, we've got to carefully review our own posture, our own resources. As you know, I'm in a tight pickle with the Chinese and Mauritius on Diego. I've asked the president not to consider Diego for now, or something along those lines. Instead, he just reads his verbatim lines. There will be no Diego Garcia in this war. So that's the end of it, which again, special relationship air quotes does not make any sense whatsoever, which is really lovely because then I am certain President Trump called him up and said, that's fine. Go ahead and shoot down a C-17 when we keep using it. Go ahead and shoot down a B-2. Go ahead. Let's see how that plays out. Because what we'll do is we'll just attack you from Mildenhall. Right there at Cambridge, right there on your own soil, if that's what you'd prefer. And then Starmer is basically an NFL referee at that point. After further review, the play does not stand as called. Diego is once again open for business, and the special relationship is reestablished minus the Lloyds of London fracas, which is now brewing.
Well put.
Yeah, that's kind of the benefit of when you're working with somebody who's not really in charge, is that's the good thing about an actor is they'll just take the bigger check from the bigger company, or in this case, the bigger threat. Yeah, under review, the subtext here, Donald Trump has something called Delta Force, and I do not. But but to what you're saying about selling it, right? That's a bit indicative. So you could say, well, how come he didn't sell it? How come he didn't, kind of really sell it like he knows it's important to sell? Well, I would imagine that's part of the compartmentalization of having somebody who's not at the high table. They don't know that
Right.
this is very
Look
important.
at Kaya Kallas.
He just
Kaya
thinks it's
Kallas.
today's flashcard. He's like, yeah, and we're going to do this thing. He doesn't know that it's a vital, don't do that type
Yeah,
thing.
Kaya Kallas. Well then, if we can't take Russia, how are we going to go after China? She said that. She said that. So what she forgot in her script card was you don't actually read on the air the thing that's in parentheses.
It's
The thing that's in the parentheses is the shit to give you the context so you know how to sell it. And what she's doing is using her hand gestures to go, ha, I don't even know how, if we can't take Russia, how would we get China? I mean, come on, people, use your brains. And you're like, not the parentheses, not.
You said the quiet part out loud.
Yeah, no, that's the parentheses part. So then what did they do? They started deleting the parentheses parts off the script cards, and then they just are out there saying weird shit that makes no damn sense. The United States will not be benefiting from MI6 intelligence against the drug cartels. It's like, oh, okay. Hold up.
it
Stop everything.
it, it does seem to slowly be materializing more that this really is it's a form of like puppet fighting, and that we're seeing like, oh, these really are figureheads. Like when we from George Carlin on, of course we always kind of know that, but you're really seeing it now.
Oh,
Or
yeah.
you're coming out and you're like reading, you're like, that guy's really, and it kind of it opens, at least for me, it opens the imagination, the possibility of, oh, well then what is Venezuela? What is Iran? And of course you're just a 5D chesser. Shut the fuck up. I'm trying to look at this as soberly as I can. Like I've been wrong more times on this podcast and will continue to be. I don't care. I'm genuinely just trying to look at what is happening, and that to me would be indicative of that, Colonel.
To General's point, think about what and saying these things without the context. Think about what Stammer's saying by saying, I'm not going to share intelligence we have about drug trafficking. Well, what intelligence do you have? And what have you done with that intelligence?
Right.
And why aren't you doing something with the intelligence that you have as the drugs are, spewing through the streets of Britain? And when he said that, I was like, what the hell?
Yeah. And then why do you have all those private wealth banks in St. Bart's right there? Is there anything to that? Is there gambling in the casino?
They have them off all of those islands.
I know.
I ran across that in the book, The Mafia, the CIA, and George Bush.
Yes.
They were using all of those islands. That's where Jeffrey Epstein was helping them set up trusts, which is why he's a quote unquote tax advisor.
Yes.
Or wealth advisor, whatever you want to call it, because he helps them set up. He's like the Paul Helliwell of today or yesterday, since he's dead. But that's what Paul Helliwell was doing with Castle Bank. He was helping, and who was the largest depositor at Castle Bank? The Pritzker family. They help them hide their wealth in these trusts in offshore locations, and the British Isles are full of them.
Yeah. Yeah, but all that shit coming off of Venezuela was paying for all of that, just the operating costs. You've got executives, you got private jets, you got this stuff's not cheap. Doing private and shadow banking and laundering. But you saw this is what the sequence of events was then when the Venezuela thing started, which I found so interesting. So the the flashpoint that City of London's pissed off is obviously UK is not going to do intel sharing with anything to do with this. That's your flashpoint. Okay. Now we have the thing that doesn't make sense in the equation, which we were waiting for. Okay, great. Next thing, wow, this is going to really stress out a lot of these private and shadow bankings. But what people don't understand about private and shadow banking is it's not illegal. It's just that it's a way to get around the banking regulations of the United States when you want a risk profile that does not match up with what the rules are. So what you can do is you could be a Jamie Dimon at Chase and say, you know what? There's a higher return for us to gain, so we'll go ahead and fund Billy's shadow bank, Sally's private bank, and we'll fund those things because we understand that with their lending, they can get a higher rate of return because they're going to take much riskier investments. So then what we don't know in that time frame after that is, well, was there any effect? Did anything happen to the St. Bart's kids? Or did anything happen to the Cayman kids? Well, it did. If you go like 2 to 3 weeks right after that, you had the failure of this operation called Tricor. Tricor is in the United States. Tricor is like a payday loan operation. It's
Yep.
they handle automobiles and cars, mostly for illegals, and you can pay by the week. Hey, can you make $100 a month or $100 a week payment? Then you get to have a car, and Tricor will underwrite all of this. But then it wasn't just Tricor, it was a lot of these little stupid ancillary financing companies that prey on poor people, and they're bellying up. Why? That was the evidence. Their money, the investments that were coming into them to make those loans were coming from the Caribbean offshore banks. So you started to see the domino effect or the cascading effects. Guess what? That then gets to guys like Jamie Dimon. That then gets to guys like Larry Fink. And then what you see is, oh, this cartel thing, it's multiple funding streams. It's the vascular system to all of it. And this is just but one tentacle. It's not a very major tentacle, but it's one we can see.
Yes.
In terms of the as Colonel Watkins and I have talked about the importance of showing this to people and not showing it out of some you're being nice to them. I mean, if you want the people behind you, you do have to show them. This is a huge part of that, I would imagine. I mean, it's the whole trope of the, was it Animal House where they all have the headphone in or whatever it is, and the guy's reading him or no, it's not. Sorry, Old School, where the guy outside is reading him the test answers, and they all have the thing and they all write it down. If you were making an allegation that everyone in the room is actually using an earpiece and getting their answers from some guy in a van, you're gonna sound like a fucking schizophrenic. Now, if your goal was to illuminate that, you could disrupt the signal, and then they all start getting the same wrong answer at the same time. Well, then the professor might start going, "Oh," because it's extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That's an important point of when you start to really see this as it's flashcards. You could go one step further and disrupt the signal to all of a sudden. What happens if he doesn't get his flashcards? He doesn't know he's working. That's compartmentalized by design. He's just going to be out there going, well, "What are we talking about? What are we doing?" That is, in a way, I would imagine, start to kind of illuminate this, and that's, I think, what you're talking about, General.
You
Yeah.
know who
Yeah.
you know who's the master of that? Trump. During his first term, that was one of the things that was most notable to me is the perpetual they were classified as leaks, but there were different versions of the leaks. And the reporting of those leaks indicated who got what card to your
Oh, yeah.
analysis.
Yeah. No, that's right. That's exactly right. Yep.
Yes, and that was masterful because they were able to diagram the network.
hmm That's exactly right. Well, this gets to another place. I'm really interested in what you think about this, Roxanne. President Obama 2 weeks ago I think it was 2 weeks ago. It might have been a week ago, but I guess he retained a lot more criminal defense attorneys, and he's hired these firms, and I guess a couple of others have too. I think if you see some of these events happening that look like they're oriented towards more and more disclosures and exposures, at some point, you got to get down to the swamp's cubicle level. And I mean the Kool-Aid drinker, apparatchik Bolsheviks who every day think they're serving this great cause where one day they too could become in a think tank position that would get them to the World Economic Forum and then get them up to the high table somehow.
They could get their flashcards.
Yeah, well, it's all just a Cub Scout racket, right? Get your bear badge and you can get a wolf badge and you can get it, whatever. But um, I have to believe that many of them, legions of them, in the IC and other corrupted parts of the government that we call lovingly the deep state, I think that they probably are starting to understand just about now, holy shit, they know who I am. They know me by name. They know what I've done. And I believe that that's true. But what's more important, whether I believe that or not, is that they believe that.
There's
So if you have nothing going, meaning there is no after the government offer for you, there is no think tank that's courting you, there is no board at Lockheed Martin for you. Um, but you have this sinking feeling that I can see what I have done might be construed as treasonous behavior towards my country. I'm in trouble.
Hmm.
there's
Are we going to, first off, what do you think about that? And second off, do we then go into a season where we start seeing a shit ton of cubicle dwellers that are like, I want a deal?
Yes,
well,
I
well,
absolutely agree with that. But Blaine, many of those people you just described are wearing a military uniform
I
too.
know that. I agree with you
all
completely.
all the more reason to want a deal. The little more.
But they don't have money for lawyers. So
No.
that's the pesky thing about these people. And actually they can't accept Mark Elias money or George Soros money for those lawyers.
Yep.
So so
To,
so you
Oh,
seem to have a problem, good sir.
they have pro bono. Come on. You don't think they're going to leave them hanging, do you?
Yeah, I do
there's
actually. There's too
there's
Yeah,
many
I
of
do
them.
think they're going to leave them hanging, and I think that's going to make even more of them talk.
Yeah.
there's something so deeply hilarious about the idea of like a Tony Robbins or a Gary V for this stuff. Like, listen, you too can one day get directives from a shadowy cutout. I used to be a nobody, and now I'm on private planes talking about deals I don't understand for people with money beyond description. Like, you too can do that. Like,
I'm Mark Ruda and you can too.
when I first started, I was selling crack, and now I'm telling people to do this. I don't know what the big picture. That there's something hilarious about that. But
Yeah.
in Annie Jacobson's Operation Paperclip, I think it's the most fascinating thing is right all about the Nazi high command turning on the end and
Yeah.
getting deals through blah 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 blah. The most that to me, none of that's surprising, or of course they do. The most interesting part to me is that a lot of these guys had like blueprints for their whatever subspecialty on the rockets that they were proficient in. They
Mhm.
had these blueprints created up on their own property going back to like 1941 and 42. So it's not like they saw the war was over. It was in the heyday, and they still had these things because they said, on the off chance this doesn't work.
Yes.
And they all did. And they're like, I had these. And they'd be like, yeah, I had these too. That's interesting to me is they have that stuff when it seems like they're winning, and they all pulled that stuff out like no issue. So I think it's human that a lot of these people are gonna
Have a
actually,
lot of shit.
I did have this thumb drive back in 2020 when it seemed like they were rolling out the vaccine pass, but I kept this just, because by definition, these people are spineless and amoral. So
Mhm.
you have to use that against them. They are slimy bitches.
Right.
Pivot with that.
But the slimy bitches are dealing with other slimy bitches. And they know they're slimy, so they're going to protect themselves from the other slimy bitches.
Well,
And
but
it is
very
natural.
easy to turn on each other.
Yes, it's very natural human nature. What you're describing is insurance against the other slimy bitches.
because they know
So,
that they're all backstabbing fucking sacks of shit.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
when I started my Air Force career, I went to purgatory. And purgatory for a pilot in the United States Air Force is called, you're going to be called a FAPE. And a FAPE is what we call a first assignment instructor pilot. You're not going on to your operational combat weapon system quite yet, my friend. You'll be staying here for 3 more years because you're going to instruct students because you are cursed with graduating the top third of your class, but not number one or number two to get the fighter. So, um, our motto in that hyper competitive environment where we measured each other down to how do your students' grade books look? The motto was, it's not enough that I succeed, but you must also fail. And when we start talking about those amoral people that you're talking about, now I want you to think about the middle setup here in the United States, because this is the City of London's management structure. Not the senior managers like Soros and Obama and the Clintons, but the middle managers, the Podestas, the Valerie Jarretts, the Brennans. Um, I think that's the class of folks that are in between the dog and the fire hydrant. And here's why. Because from up on high, they represent an incredible amount of risk because they have an incredible amount of knowledge. So I think that there's a great assassination risk for those folks. Um, but down below, now they're squeezed on the other side because the cubicle dwellers will be only too happy to go, yeah, John Brennan told me to do this. Oh, no, Podesta told me to do that. No, Samantha Power said this is where the billions in those NGO dollars were going to go. Um, and and so it's that middle tier that gets squeezed on both ends. Some of them will be suicided with 3 bullets to the back of their head. Some of them will incur, probably witness protection because the cubicle dwellers are going after them, and that's how they get them. Here's my only concern, because this stuff sounds so great. It's how the strategy of doing this is going to be. So if you're going to take it through the DOJ and you're going to take it through the courts and you're going to get it done that way, or military courts under normal court-martial rules, then we won't get this work done until about 2137 that year. If actually probably mid 2137, if I'm being more precise, sorry. But if so the only thing that I would say from a strategy standpoint is we have to make the case, and I mean we too, the kids in alternative media land, podcast land, and all of that. There is an argument that needs to be made for reviewing both sides of the non-existent aisle in DC and declaring the government is incapacitated, and then therefore under constitutional rules you're going to have to go to some sort of form of martial law, some form of tribunal, because the illegality is too widespread. It's too much, and we have an incapacitated government. And personally, my own opinion is I do believe we have an incapacitated government.
Yeah,
I don't know how else to fix it.
we have a criminal government, a government full of criminals. Look, but I've always had a sneaking suspicion, only because I know a couple of the people that were involved in that. There may be quite a bit of this that has gone on without our knowledge.
Yeah.
And,
Oh,
and
yeah.
let me
Yeah.
let me give you an example. In 2019, in the country of Italy, there obviously I pay attention to the mafia and the Gladio operators in Italy specifically because that's kind of the depth of material. So they had an entire mafia family that was intimately involved in Gladio during its time, which is some elements of it existing today inside of Italy, and primarily mafia. There was an entire mafia family that was involved in all of this. And unbeknownst to the citizens of Italy, because the history of anybody investigating this in Italy, to your point, Blaine, was they're assassinated.
Right.
So if you're a prosecutor, you're going to get killed. If you're a
Right.
judge, you're going to get killed. If you're a reporter reporting on it, you're going to get killed. So what the government did was they created this entire cell of prosecutors, judge, jury people, the whole 9 yards. They spent about 2 years building out this huge facility. Some reports said it was underground. I can't confirm that, but they had all of the trials and no one knew it existed until the end.
Wow.
They spent about 48 hours throughout the entire sector of Italy where this mafia family was, and they launched like almost 1,000 people to go out and apprehend these people. And within 48 hours, they were all taken down. They were taken to this facility. They had their trials. And it was not until the end of all of this that it was ever reported that it happened.
See, I learned stuff like this. It would be a, Cold War technology or precedents like that. And then I'm always like, I was trying to remain grounded. And then I find something factual like that. And I'm like, no, I'm not crazy enough. Like,
Yeah. Right.
I've tried it. I'm like, I want to stop being that guy. And then, you read about anti-gravitic propulsion in the 50s and you're like, fucker. But like, that's insane.
Yeah. And so to couple that, that all of those reports about them expanding Gitmo, they're all true. You can see
Well, that
that.
was the first
That
thing I
is
was
very
gonna
true.
say is like,
Yeah.
fuck.
So I don't know what the relationship to those two things are, but I could see and I could make an argument that they're directly related.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Catherine
Yeah.
Hara had just done some really great work going down to Gitmo to kind of document the expansion and what's going on down there.
And we
Uh,
don't know that there's not things going on or that
we
things weren't
don't. We
already
absolutely
going
don't.
on. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'll tell you what, between here and July 15th, which I kind of call the informal cutoff point going into the midterms, major shit's got to go down. Major stuff. Astonishing things have to happen. Otherwise, you're just going to have status quo. If the midterms were today, I think you'll have a very complicit John Thune and complicit Speaker Johnson that will gladly turn over power to the Dems. Also, they can get rid of Trump by impeachment, conviction this time next year, and we're going to be in a whole new place. Not a good one. I think, what was it? Mel Gibson played that guy in Mad Max. What was that character's name? But anyway, that's the kind of environment we get if we don't win on this hill. So the good news is we have no choice. We got to win. But I think it's good for us out here in our spaces to be good ankle biters and not accept any strategy, lock, stock, and barrel. And if it's worthy of criticism, then it gets the criticism. People who have been very busy on social to tell me how I should think about a variety of things like Israel, air quotes, the plan, whatever the flavor of the day is. I'm like, no, balls and strikes. If I think there's a problem, you're probably gonna hear my voice because we all bought tickets on this flight.
which is
Correct.
which is which is just in general how you should go about your life in general. It's like don't ever take anything as it's that, therefore it's good. Um,
Right.
Well, I didn't leave one cult to get in another,
yeah.
right?
Well, it's
Yeah.
as Tim Dillon says, he's a comedian, but he's a genius. Looking at the world through the lens of Democrat, Republican, left and right. What it really is, it's the shirking of the burden of independent thought. It
Correct.
it takes away because it takes a little effort. You go,
Right.
I don't want to. Well, you gotta look at it and go, and not just intellectually. You gotta look at it and examine things. It's also egotistically. You have to go, oh, that's the guy I've been
Yeah, but
defending, and
Tommy,
now.
you're getting onto something extremely important. Everybody is led to go get into a team. What team do
Yeah.
you want to be on? The Dems? Do you want to be on the Republicans?
Well, it's
By the
the
way,
right move.
there's
It's in
there's
our
there's
it's in
no
our
difference.
DNA to it's that
Yeah,
if you're trying to control, that's exactly
here
what you
here
do.
here in very red, by the way, that's folklore. In very red Northern Idaho, and that's folklore. That's complete mythology. In very red Northern Idaho, I had a person come up to me in a restaurant, and they said, um, you know, uh, I listened to you, Blaine, on the air. You're not a very good Republican. And I said
Thank you.
that is one of the highest compliments I could be paid. And I so appreciate you. I'm
Dude,
actually not a Republican. I'm an American.
but dude,
But thank you.
I always tell people, yeah, when they're like, you know, you're not, yeah, how come you're taking, I'm like, I'm Tommy, I'm not a Republican.
My
People
mom
are
calls
like,
me Blaine.
I like most of your shows, but I don't like, I'm like, how could you like all of my shows? I've done 2,000 episodes. One
Yeah.
person likes all my shows, and it's my mom. Like
Yeah.
that's
Which
it.
one was it? Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
well, I really didn't like this guy. I'm like, dude, I've done thousands of these, and but yeah, no, it's you have to look at it and examine it as you will, and that's where I come back to when I'm looking at and examining this. Yes, it happens to be something I like, but it's also something I believe. I'm like, yeah, it's not nothing. It's not nothing's happening. Things are happening faster and faster and faster, which is
yeah.
why I'm optimistic for if it's gonna happen, if things are gonna change, it's the kindling is it's going, it's sparking, the wood is dry, the flames are licking it. I'm hopeful.
That's the
I am
reason
hopeful
why
too.
I don't believe most people on in common history is taught about Hegel and the importance of understanding the creation of a polar opposite in order to control people.
Right.
So you have to have a left and a right if you really want to have friction. And that's how they psyops people. That's how they control people. You put them in opposing camps and then you make them fight. It's like, dog fights or the rooster fights. It's that medieval. That's the mentality. And they've spent probably the last 100 years perfecting this technique. And if you choose not to be in either one of those camps, you are the only one, your independent thought that can look at that one and be objective. And that's why they do not want you in that middle.
How dare you critically think? How dare you?
Correct.
How
It
dare you?
takes way more effort.
Yep.
Um, to tie it back into two current events is could we go back to what I believe you're saying before we started recording? About we say about FARC, Colonel?
Well, and I think this is an interesting conversation that Blaine and I were having. For people like me who've done really deep research into these geographical locations, there are things that are going to happen as we move down this road where you will typically have to roll your eyes, right? So, one of the things that I discovered, because I had several of my friends, as a matter of fact, one of the guys I went to Air War College with was a special ops helicopter pilot. And another guy, an Army guy in our same class, was an Army helicopter pilot. He went on to be the brigade commander or whatever it is at Fort Rucker. And we had lots of, because we were going to Vietnam, we had lots of conversations about special ops and different engagements and where they deployed and stuff like that. And he's the one that got me interested in the operations in Colombia, flying, what he thought was counter narcotics. But he was one of the first ones that clued me in that the FARC and the Colombian government, that's kind of one of these two opposing camps. So the FARCs really were, and I'm just going to kind of talk about this generically, was the resistance forces in Colombia, right? So Colombia is taken over as a narco state. The CIA is embedded everywhere. MI6 is there. Mossad's there, selling them Galil weapons. We're training them originally at the School of Americas and then the Hemispheric School. They have 20,000 excess paramilitary people in Colombia that goes around the world and does these Gladio operations. That's why the preponderance of foreigners in Ukraine today are Colombians, and you can
Yeah,
tell that by the death list.
that's right.
So I came to realize that we were not funding in Plan Colombia an anti-narcotics operation. We were actually funding the narcotic operation. And you have to have a quote unquote resistance group, not that they're controlled by the CIA, but in order to justify the amount of weapons that we were bringing into Colombia, if you don't have a resistance to try to kill,
Right.
then you have no justification for bringing those weapons in. And that's what the FARC was. The FARC didn't produce cocaine. There were people in the FARC that grew coca plants, but that is a indigenous thing to do. They make tea out of it and all kinds of other stuff. What they did was tax, because the ground that they monopolized or controlled was a transit point. So if the narcotics was going out of Colombia by land, they had to pay taxes to the FARC. That's how they raised money for their own weapons. And so they're a small rebellious force. But when they were preparing for Plan Colombia and this massive hundreds of millions of dollars pouring into Colombia, what they did was they had one of their rudimentary cocaine manufacturing labs that they staged an attack on and then littered FARC uniforms around in the aftermath of it, took pictures of it, and said, oh, look, we took out a FARC lab. And that was kind of like the, oh my God, we need all the funding, we can do this, and blah, blah, blah. And the entire thing was staged. So today, or a couple of days ago, when we took out that Ecuadorian lab, that was a FARC facility, according to the local press. You can go on Yandex and get translated local press releases. And of course, I just kind of sat back in my chair and go, not this again. Whose intelligence are we using? However, Blaine made a very good point, and I'll let you go.
So the thing here is you got to look at all the layers of itches that get scratched out of just this one example that the colonel's talking about. And that is look at it at the top, City of London. What are they managing? They got a whole damn other opium war because these people don't ever come up with innovative new creative ideas. They just recycle the old bullshit. And they got a whole damn new opium war for what? To bring the United States to heel. It's about control, and then you make a few quid on the side. Okay, that's there. Now, come on down to the DC level. We got business development going on. This is the greatest thing ever. You've got this terror group called the FARC, and we've got drugs down in Colombia. We're going to have to put ODA teams down there and supply them and do FID, and we're going to have to do all kinds of stuff. But what does that really mean? It means billions upon billions upon billions of dollars. Nobody's saying anything else. And in DC to counter that stuff, nobody even asking the question, how dare you say anything that gets in the way of our counter-terror efforts or FID? And then all these industrial complexes like the intelligence complex, all of these security firms, the big six defense contractors all orient products to this. They get on the funding line for what we call the FIDEP, so it's basically institutional money. And then it's money forever, and we're always going to be fighting in these little jungles forever, and we'll never come out of them. And then you get think tanks where these pompous asses like Max Boot write about this shit, glorifying these little wars down there in these little stupid ass jungles. And it's all an ecosystem to support the other ecosystem. Now, here's what I never understood, because I've done one tour in the Pentagon, actually two tours in the Pentagon, two tours in the combatant commands. But in the combatant commands, I served at UCOM twice, and then CENTCOM on a detailed. I was detailed out to them. When I look at South America, when I look at the Central Command, or the Middle Eastern AOR, or what we had in Europe. So now let's think about those. You got Iran, you've got in our AOR we had Ukraine, and you've got Colombia, to some extent Mexico, Ecuador, and Nicaragua, but you've got what you've got down in South America. What I did not understand, and what they are so careful to do, is the intelligence is all cooked. Everything we're looking at in the combatant commands reinforces the behaviors and the belief system that they want you to have. So literally, when I used to sit down in briefings on Ukraine, it's not even just the lies. They don't start with once upon a time. It's the lies by omission. It's the lies by omission. It's the yeah, listen, militarily, we don't need to get into the politics of the Maidan Revolution. Let's just move into this other thing here. And we got little green men problems. So let's just address that. In other words, it's calculated, it's elegant, they're so good at it that people, very intelligent people, right on up to the 4-star level, are embroiled in beliefs that aren't reality. It took me Benghazi plus going into retirement and actually thinking about it for a couple of years before I could go, oh, wow. Hey, wait a minute. And I still have some of these little epiphanies from back in my career where I'm like, oh no, that was something very different. Um, but it's that manipulation, and then what you do is you create these talking head generals like myself who get out there and they say stuff, and you're like, that's crazy talk. Why are you saying that talk? I just heard a 3-star general on TV talk about why Ukraine was winning this war. And I was like, what? I actually think you believe that shit. Where are you getting this stuff from? Um, it's an entire machine ecosystem, and they spend a lot of time in our combatant commands because I will tell you from, the person hitting the brew button with 2 stripes on their shoulder all the way up to 4-star general, by and large, most of these people are extremely honest, high integrity, love their country, patriotic people. They're in an echo chamber being completely duped. Truth's marinated.
I, yeah, it'd be hard to put a number on the difference between the two. One of the most astounding things that I ran across in doing all of this research is how often the CIA actually dress up like military.
Oh, yes.
I knew the OSI did that. I mean, being a personnel officer, when we had an OSI team come into our base for an investigation, you generally knew who they
Yeah.
were.
Yeah.
But it was not obvious. And it became obvious to me looking at people's personnel records. But I was shocked. I just finished doing some research for the guys that were doing, as a matter of fact, I've got 2 more podcasts to do. The creation of the U-2 program under the CIA, while there was a parallel one slightly delayed for the Air Force, and that the ARC wings that were set up overseas to fly the U-2 out of
Mhm.
had CIA integrated into the wing wearing a military uniform.
Yeah, and again, that's a slippery slope. And I think we saw that in Afghanistan in a really bad way because you had, and this led up to the fall of Kabul, where untold amounts of really, really bad people got into our country. But I had a case officer tell me one time, and he was wearing military garb downrange, and he was telling me, well, I've got, we're totally integrated. I've got special ops training. And I said, excuse me, special ops training? Really? Tell me more about this special ops training that you've got, case officer. And he said, well, yeah, no, I've trained with the SEALs and the regiment and all these guys. And I said, uh-huh. So some snake eater took you out in the deserts of near Bagram and taught you how to shoot a carbine, and you've got special ops training. And where I'm going with this is not all of them, not all of them. I'm not going to impugn everybody anywhere. It's never that way. But I can't tell you how many egos and how much hubris, organizational hubris, I would run into. We are the panopticon. We know all. You don't know anything. The military are just good elements of service provision that we get, and that's where it's at. And here's the problem. Even at that level, they don't even understand they're being manipulated. That they're in a marinated vat of lies and cooked bullshit. That they have a belief system that they think is completely real, and it is also completely untrue.
So, what I have observed in all of this research is the fundamental creation of back in 1947 of all of this apparatus is that the CIA is number one. And the really only function they see the Department of Defense at the time was to support them,
That's right.
period.
Yeah.
And they take that into operationals because here's what I think the problem is. The US military thought their role in Afghanistan was to defeat the bad guys. That's not what the role was for the actual mission that the CIA was. The bad guys was in the way of their opium fields, i.e. the Taliban. So we're going to have the military come in because there's too many of them for us to take them all out. So your supporting role is to take out the Taliban so we can get our opium fields back.
That's right.
And the military thinks they're in there where the CIA is supporting them, feeding them intelligence. And that's not the way it is at all.
I know.
They are there.
And I didn't know that at the time.
I know. Neither did I. And
Yeah.
when you understand that,
Yeah.
from 1947, whether it was Korea, we weren't there to actually fight communism. We were there to provide another front into China for Chiang Kai-shek. Same thing
Yeah.
with Vietnam and the opium. And you just go conflict after conflict after conflict. And the military has a completely different version of the situation on the ground while they're engaged. And they have no inkling of the fact that it is, in many cases, in all the cases I've looked into, we're there to do the CIA mission. We just think it's our mission.
When I was the wing commander at our base in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, this is again one of my moments much, much later on down the road where I went, no freaking way.
Yep.
I was there at that critical time. I'm there to provide the logistics for most of the new surge into Afghanistan. Bacon, beans, and bullets to the war, get the troops out of there, fly a third of the air refueling missions, double, triple the capacity of the wing. And then we have a violent, bloody revolution, which I could see coming. But what I never appreciated or understood was that it wasn't an organic revolution at all, that it was completely orchestrated. And the people that orchestrated this were lying to my face once a week in the damn embassy when I would attend meetings. So it must have been funny around the water cooler about Patsy Colonel Holt, who doesn't really understand the whole situation. And at the same time, I'm saving their families and their lives from real no shit bullets that are flying all over Bishkek and my base as I evacuate them and save a bunch of Peace Corps kids, because that is a real absolute PK of one, probability of kill of one if you eat that precious metal called lead. And it all just went. And it wasn't until many more years later when we started I looked at some of your work on Gladio. I looked at some of these color revolutions, and it really kind of locked in with me when I watched what happened in Ukraine. And I'm like, no freaking way.
How fortuitous is it for them to stage a revolution while the logistical support that you think you're there for Afghanistan provides that capability for them to do Operation B?
Yeah. Well, Bill Burns was the regional ambassador of that area at the time, who would go on to be the CIA boss. Imagine that. And
happens every time.
Yeah, it's just months right after this. And so I do know for a fact, because I mean I worked for General Petraeus, and I know for a fact State Department had a royal case of the ass with DOD and wanted that base out of Central Asia. They didn't want to apply the resources to Central Asia, didn't understand the strategic value of it. They wanted it gone. So, and what, again, now let's get back to the drugs. What got stopped because Bishkek and Manas were there in Central Asia. What got stopped was all those supply chains on narco terror. And the
Yeah.
narco terror supply chains were going into China and destabilizing them and going into Russia, which the CIA really loved.
Yes.
So I'm in the way.
Yes.
Nobody thought it was important to go tell me I was in the way. In fact, my orders were we're losing the base in Bishkek. We need it for this surge. You're going to go there, renegotiate the whole thing, hold the ground. And they got mad at me because I was successful. I went and learned Kyrgyz. I went and ignored the government.
Overachiever.
I know. I got into the civil society. I went and propped up women's programs, and the ambassador, I never understood it. She was literally getting more and more pissed off with my existence every damn month I was there. And I was
Because
like,
you become a vital threat. You
yes,
obviously are intelligent and you are likely to see their undermining more so than anybody else.
I should have learned my lesson at the country team meeting when my boss showed up and asked everybody at the country team how they're supporting my wing. And the USAID director for the country said, "We have zero reason to be working with Blaine or Colonel Holt in any of his endeavors here. There is no touch point between USAID and the US military, even though I was delivering way more real humanitarian aid in that country than that woman could have ever have dreamed of." And the other part was she had a bunch of water projects in the southern part of the country where the real terrorists were that had all failed. And I said, "Hey, I got a whole civil engineering group. I'll get down there with some Humvees and we'll fix that shit right now. I'll get your stuff up and running." Thinking I'm going to get a nice pat on the head and a gold star. This is going to be great. They looked at me like I had just burned the building down.
Yes. All right. So you just said that USAID was not supplying humanitarian because that's not their job. Their job
Oh,
is
I know what they were doing now. Oh, I'm
okay. And the aid going down for those dams were going down to the training camps to train the terrorists,
yes,
not
ma'am.
to do the water thing. And if you think
Yes,
you're going
ma'am.
to go down there and you're going to actually give them water, you
Yes.
become dangerous.
Yes. And now I'm so blessed and happy that when I was doing my military fellowship at the CFR, that I did not finish writing my book, which I now am re-examining how that book is going to end up. It's called Hard Truths on Soft Power Airmen on the Ground. And it's with the epiphanies that I have had over the last 8 years, it's going to be a different book than the nice cotton candy one that Colonel Holt would have written in New York City and finished.
And that's so important what you just said, because we in the military have such a special place, both historically and intellectually as Americans, right?
Mhm.
We are held to a standard that is much different than the general population. And by keeping you ignorant
Yeah.
in your military duties and giving you all of this world experience, you come home and you write a book that is blissfully ignorant of the
Right.
real world, but it's significantly credible because you
Yes.
lived it,
Yes.
but you were in things you had no context of whatsoever. And now,
Yeah.
8 years later,
Yeah.
you're looking around the world and you're going, son of a bitch. They
Right.
lied to me here. They
I was
lied.
bamboozled.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is why they don't want any of this information
Right.
out.
But
And
Roxanne, suppose I had published it. Then I've impugned my own credibility. That's one.
yes,
And two, the book can be used against me as a
yes,
record of history. And this is an important book that chronicled the whole thing, and this is the way it really happened. Now,
yes.
let's go back because one of the friends I made that year I was in New York was George Kennan's daughter, Grace Warnicki Kennan,
Oh
and
shit.
amazing woman. I adored her, and what she told me, and I forgot the guy, John, somebody wrote he's a professor Princeton, I think. He had just written that year or the year after a biography about George Kennan. And Grace had told me she just said, I don't have complimentary things to say about this. Will you be with me at the National War College when they unveil this thing? And he talks about it. The reason is it's the same setup. Now, I'm no Kennan, and nothing I was ever going to write was going to rival the long telegram or have such consequence. But Ambassador Kennan had no intent to embark on the strategy in the Cold War that resembled what would be bastardized of his long telegram. They bastardized the whole thing. They Paul Nitz, and the rest of the little acolytes for Allen Dulles. They wrote NSC 68, which was trying to codify the response to what Kennan was saying we need to do to engage Russia. And so Kennan didn't get to rewrite anything, and he had always thought that, well, they hijacked me. They hijacked everything I said. This isn't what I meant. And so I wonder, if I was to walk back through it, how many generals, ambassadors, scholars have written something that they thought was their truth at the time. They had massively researched it, only to find out much later on that all I wrote was a pack of lies, and it was all intentional, and I was run down a garden path. And now if I come out against it, I've screwed up my own credibility and the like. And so it's a very interesting formula on this fifth generation warfare battlefield.
So I've got mixed opinions of Kennan. I agree with everything that you just said, but he appears so many places in Gladio, in the government,
Yep.
with full knowledge of this fake anti-communist campaign and the
Yeah.
creation
Right.
of this strategy of tension.
I know where you're going.
Gladio.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I've come to appreciate is many of these people, there has been a conscious effort to pick pieces of their career out and highlight them
Yeah.
when their life is so much more nuanced. And that was
Yeah.
kind of, you and I's first thing about Eisenhower.
Yeah.
We're taught to love Eisenhower. He warned us of the military-industrial complex.
Sure.
He was a, let's tactical nukes. I'm fine with that kind of philosophy.
Sure.
The cultivation of those military, like LeMay and all of them, and also his extensive use of assassinations.
Right.
I was just blown away. I'm like,
Right.
who is this guy? That's not what I was taught.
So you're going to a place where, especially with Kennan, it could be there's a couple of things here. The thing that we don't get to see through the prism of history, but we know it's present, go back to the Bronfmans and Myron Lansky, is that when there's a very public figure with a lot of power and influence and credibility that's not playing ball, there are several different tools to get them on sides. That's one.
Yep.
Two, in the case of a Kennan, I can't help but wonder, and I don't know what the answer is. I can't help but wonder that when you've drawn a line in the sand and people bastardize your work, that the next step, if you're not in some form or fashion continuing down the path, that your credibility, your life's work, your legacy, and your relevancy just flitter away. Meaning, did they put a big cage around him and say, well, you can become the disgraced ambassador who tried to counter what we knew to be right and good about countering the communist menace and the Russians, or you can have a very nice path that ends up with you being fondly remembered. And what I do remember about, if you look at a lot of the biographies in World War II, especially that particular period of time, I would say end of World War I, going into World War II. So let's go from Eddie Rickenbacker to Claire Chennault. We'll bracket it by airman. The
Get me started on Claire Chenault. Go ahead.
Oh, I want to have that talk with you. We're going to do a podcast just on that. So, uh, do a lot of those people in that period of time, their legacy, their credibility, and how they would be remembered historically, so much more important as a value, a human value, than I think even today. In the news environment that we live in today. I would say that because we didn't have the technology we had, we didn't. It was really these universities, think tanks, the books written of the time that people were very cautious, I guess, about how they would end up. And some of those big warning signs is look what happened to Curtis LeMay. Curtis LeMay had a bad day in Congress, and I mean a seriously bad day in Congress. Well, Kurt, you're not in charge of the nuclear football, and no, we don't really want you launching nuclear weapons at anybody. So, but
You
nice
wanted
job.
to launch a nuclear weapon at everybody.
Yeah, I'm aware. I'm aware. In fact, as an airlift pilot, we had to have our beloved General Tunner pull his ass right out of the Ramstein command post to go. No, listen, hold up. You don't know shit about delivering the goods, so we'll take over
I
from
was
here.
shocked. I mean,
He wanted to have Gail Halvorson court-martialed.
oh my God.
Yeah, yeah. Gail
That was
Halvorson
his answer
saved
to
the.
everything.
Yeah, I know. Save the relationship. Yep. So
You're going to nuke Cuba.
yeah. And anyway, who knows? Mafia guns, personal vanity. It's hard. I'll tell you what is compelling to me: sitting down with the man's daughter and listening to her for an hour and a half over lunch. That actually that talks to me quite well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gershlam is fucking hilarious. I mean, you agree with him, disagree with him. He just has a character. He's
Well, he nearly
hilarious.
ended the human race. There is
Yeah, I mean, listen, we've all done that. I mean,
At least take a big chunk out of it.
there's a
Yeah,
great
and then he got 25,000 killed in the skies over Germany because daylight bombing. And
he
I
does
mean, I
have
could
a,
go on and on and on about the bomber mafia that spawned our damn Air Force from Hap Arnold on, and I can tell you, I'm just like, wow, wow.
there's a great quote from him though. He's on a flight line of I think B-36s and they're all gassing up and there's fuel all over the ground and he's smoking his cigar.
Yeah,
And everyone's looking at him because there's just like an inch of fuel on the ground and all these B-36s lined up and they're like some kid or some younger guy goes, you got to put out that cigar. If an ember falls, we're gonna lose half our bomber fleet. And he looked up and down and said the planes wouldn't dare light on fire. And I just think that's such a great quote. I mean, they like him, hate him, whatever. I mean, I strive for that kind of confidence and delusional belief in
it's
myself.
not about like or hate. It's about how does that shit go in this military service.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and you just sit and listen, we never stopped it. We never stopped it. He
of
had
course.
incarnates that went right on through Air Force history. I explained what a FAPE is. I was a T-38 instructor pilot, loved my little white rocket. But there wasn't a damn FAPE when General Ashey was in command of Air Training Command that didn't want to go down and put something in his mailbox that was going to blow apart half the damn base. That's how onerous he made life for us. And
Isn't General Ashy the curb guy?
the curb guy?
Yeah. He demanded there be curbs
Yeah. Yes. That was one of his things.
all
Yes,
over Randolph.
I had a colonel. He was a full bird colonel. He told me this as I was a captain, baby cat. No, I was still first lieutenant. And he came up from Randolph because the way he treated his staff was Attila the Hun
Oh,
times
he is
27. And Ashy the Aggie, so this colonel came up and I had flown several times with him, and the colonel comes up and he's sitting around with us having a scotch at the O Club, and we said, "So, sir, how is it getting along with General Ashy?" And this man said, "You know, I I don't want to hear one afternoon that on the highway outside the base gate that General Ashy in his little K car command vehicle had a fender bender and the general got injured. I don't want to hear that." And we're like, okay. And then he goes, "I want to hear that an 18 wheeler coming in the opposite direction came across the median at 110 miles an hour
Good Lord.
and hit that fucker's car so hard that they found one of his eyeballs in New Mexico. That's what that's what I want to hear. And we're like, oh, I want to work for that guy.
Yeah, he was a nightmare.
Anyway, so the LeMay strain, the LeMay DNA strain in our Air Force does follow through. I could name 7 or 8 other general officers that you're like, how did they make it to captain, let alone this vaulted rank? And then they were above the law, above the rules, above everything. Yes, of course, I'm sleeping with my aide. Now let's move along.
Um,
Yep.
to kind of bring it to a close is because things are moving so quickly and it's more and more is happening, it's less delusional fantasies. And I'm always cautious to do this about predictions, but per what we've been saying, what do you guys see coming in the coming weeks or month regarding Iran or Lloyds of London or any what is the next shoe to the next foot to drop?
I I have no idea. I think the finance piece of this is going to be critical to Blaine's point early on. We're going to see some really desperate things happen. The curtailing of the cartel stream, these financial private equities are crashing. Insurance is a big part of the financing of everything because without that capability or their, acquiescent to, we're going to cut off, thinking they're going to have some negative effect on Trump at Lloyd's is kind of, you know, it's going to spite themselves, not Trump. So I don't have any specific, but the I think we pay attention to, just to Blaine's point, the second and third order effects of the operations that are already ongoing. Um, because to me, the biggest piece of this right now is the financial piece, because we are crippling China right now by some of these secondary effects of Venezuela and Iran.
Joe
Yeah, I think the key theme for the rest of the year is acts of desperation. And acts of desperation are extremely dangerous. And so that could be on the financial side. Maybe we fail in a global economy intentionally by, Lloyd's of London can do a lot more damage. They can wipe out supply chains. There's no question that they can do that. So there's that. The bond markets already would indicate to you that we're on an eve of a very interesting place. I know Scott Bessent is doing everything he can to counter that. So far, he's been quite successful. But then desperation can also mean a lot of dead people. And what I mean by that is you've got Orban in Hungary today, this morning, sounding the warning horn on Europe actually wanting a major war as bad as it possibly can and wants to force troops into Ukraine to get it all going. Um, they have been at this. The fire blankets by President Trump and team have been applied. They put a tourniquet almost everywhere in the world to deny them this. But it's a very telling moment that the camouflage about who the real bad guys are, they're throwing it off to the side and they don't really give a rat's ass whether you see them or not. And when they do that, that's when they become at their most damn dangerous. And so what I would say is here at home, domestic terrorism, keep your head on a swivel. Things that don't make sense require your immediate examination. And in the globe right now, we have to look at flashpoints just about every damn place. And then don't forget that the swamp can do bad things any damn time and twice on Sunday. And and if you do see us go into some massive state of accountability, oh, that desperate enemy is going to be a cornered honey badger. It's going to be, it'll get even more interesting. So yeah, these are get your popcorn out, stay safe, stay strapped, and make sure you got a lot of food at home, some power generation, and take care of your neighbors and have a relationship with your creator.
always a cheery episode. Always, always. I like these episodes. There's like a nice Xanax. Just the entire conversation is very soothing. and I never leave here wanting to jump off a building. So we'll wrap this up. I don't know where Steve Murray is. He's probably doing classified research in Iran or something. I have no
I heard
idea.
he's in Colombia.
I heard he, yeah. I heard he's the new. I
For the
heard he's the
FARC.
new Ayatollah. Ayatollah Murray.
No, I think he's running for president in Colombia.
Oh,
Yeah.
Godspeed, Steve. We'll wrap this up, guys. Thank you both for time out of your Sunday, of course, and most importantly, what you said in closing. In all seriousness, guys, relationship with God. Seriously, it just even if it's 30 seconds of prayer a day, just make an attempt. He will help you. He always does. And you just have to try. And I think that that's genuinely the most important point is get good with God, and you'll walk the middle path. So,
Amen.
amen. We'll wrap this up for now. General, Colonel, thank you so much. I'll text this to you guys when it's up, and
Hey,
look forward to the next one. Thank you guys.
take care.
Guys, thank you for watching.